Hi, my name is Heather Solomon, and welcome to our webinar discussing the different branding options that you have for Office 365, also referred to as SharePoint Online. This is a pre-recorded webinar as a makeup session for our live webinar, which unfortunately kept experiencing streaming issues with the YouTube channel. So we are just going to record it and post it for everyone to see. So if you have any questions, please go ahead and send us an email. You can contact us through our website, and we'll post everything at the end on how you can go through and contact us. So I'm happy to answer questions. Just email those in to me. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. So when we are facing branding SharePoint Online, we have a few different challenges and we have some decisions that we need to make. Now, overall, SharePoint Online is a great tool. It's allowing for a lot of organizations to bring tools to their employees and to their company without necessarily having to stand up servers, without necessarily having to go through more expensive licensing options. However, it is truly set up as a tool for you to just use as it has been provided. We do have branding options inside of SharePoint Online, but I think a lot of that is because of how SharePoint originally started, with being something that you would install on premises at your organization. So a lot of those branding options have been carried over to SharePoint Online, but due to how they handle SharePoint Online functionality changes and how they're going to go through and push out new things that you can do and upgrades, it makes branding a bit more of a challenge. When we're dealing with SharePoint on premises, we are in complete control. We are able to say, all right, on this given date, we are going to choose to install all of our upgrades, and then we're going to move forward and we can do testing, we can do user acceptance, whatever your process may be, you're going to be in ultimate control. But we do not have that kind of flexibility with SharePoint Online. Instead, all of that server maintenance is going to be done for us, which is really nice, but we don't have the option to say, okay, the following UI changes that are coming down the pipe, I'm going to choose when we're going to put those out there. I'm going to do appropriate end user testing. Instead, it's just going to get pushed out. And it's not going to get pushed out just every now and then. Changes are going to get pushed out on a pretty regular basis. And so they have just this ripple approach to new functionality, and then that same ripple approach to deploying all of that new functionality. So we don't have the ability to test things out beforehand. And in fact, you don't even have the ability to refuse an upgrade. I can't come in and say, you know what, I really don't want the new document library structure that you're providing. So you are going to essentially be, stuck just a bit by whatever it is that they are deciding to push down. Now, some of these changes are great and it's going to be very helpful. Other changes are going to be a bit jarring. We've often found with end users and SharePoint, or any tool for that matter, that they get used to how something is presented to them. They go online, this is what they see, and so therefore that's what they expect. And when they go to online the next day, new work day, and they see that everything is changed, it's a very jarring experience for them. And so they end up calling the help desk, they call you, they reach out, they say, what's wrong? Why is all my stuff different? And they're just, in general, not happy. If you're working with SharePoint on premises, you can prepare for this. You can say, hey, there's changes coming. You can put up even messages on the home screen that says, check this out. We've updated some stuff. We realize this is new and different. Here's some documentation to help you out. We don't have that luxury with SharePoint Online. Instead, we're going to be in a situation where we're in the exact same boat. We also came to work today and noticed that these new changes have been pushed out. So you're always in this kind of state of playing a little bit of catch up and not quite know what's going on. So those are going to be the challenges with working with SharePoint Online in regards to branding and the user interface. So we have a lot of great features that are coming along, but at the same time, we don't have control over those features when they're applied, nor do we have the option to refuse the application of any of those features. So what can we do about it? We can be proactive and we can watch the roadmap. So Microsoft has put out the Office 365 roadmap, and there's a couple of URLs that can be useful for you. The first one, the fasttrack.microsoft.com/roadmap, is going to be a full list of not only things that are currently being deployed, but future planned updates, things that they had planned to do but have decided now to not do, and they've put indefinite holds on it. So not only can you see what's currently being pushed out, you can see what's about to be pushed out, what's been put hold. You can go through and you can filter for SharePoint, because this is going to be a full list for all of Office 365. So it's going to include updates for OneNote and Word and things like that. But there is a search box, and I really wish that search box also had a filter or just something else, because you don't necessarily think of filtering when you see the word search. You think to go search for something very specific, like what's going on with the document libraries. But if you use that search box and you type in SharePoint, then it'll go through and filter everything to be SharePoint specific. That way you can kind of trim down that very large list into something that you can digest. But this is going to be up to you. You have to go out and, make those plans to check it on a weekly basis or whatever time frame you're comfortable with. There is also a third-party website that has an RSS feed, and that's going to be the roadmapwatch.com. So if you do follow RSS feeds, if that's something that you make as a part of your daily habits, or maybe you do it a few times a week or something, that could also help you. So you can just subscribe to that RSS feed and then get updates that way. But the most surefire thing is going to be to watch the roadmap. It is a rather updated and fresh-looking website, so it looks good, it works well, and then you're going to be able to track and see what those changes are that are coming along. So what are the different branding options that we have for SharePoint Online? I know this one seems a little strange, but what you can do is just leave well enough alone. So we can stick with the out-of-the-box design, and that's going to allow us to come in and we can modify the logo, and we can of course do all of our content changes, but pretty much just stick with SharePoint the way it is. The next level up is going to be to use a theme, also known as a composed look. So once we moved into SharePoint 2013, they took the concept of theme and they've kind of tucked it underneath this overall idea of a composed look, where you bring in various components. I bring in some font information, some color information, some layout information, and I compose a look. So we can go to that. The next step above that is going to just be using CSS, cascading style sheets. You can do an awful lot with CSS. So I can come in and I can say, all right, I want this to move across the screen. I want this to be over here. I want this to be added in. You can do a lot with CSS. Next level from that is going to be a master page. Now, a master page is going to be as much branding or a highest level of branding that you're going to be able to provide. It's going to allow you to add content in. It's going to allow you to remove SharePoint functionality in bits and pieces. It's really going to have a high level of customization. Now, standing with this list, but kind of apart from the rest, is going to be page layout. So page layout's not going to be another level above master pages. It's just going to be another tool that's available for your use. And it's going to stand a little bit separate from all of these other options, and we'll talk about why. But first, I just want to walk through every single one of these options and look at some examples inside of SharePoint Online, and not just talk about, well, this is what a theme is versus this is what CSS can do, but physically see what is it we can do when we take a design outside of SharePoint, apply it into SharePoint using these different methods. But first, let's just talk about out-of-the-box SharePoint Online design. So this is going to be the closest you're going to get to something that you could consider bulletproof against future UI upgrades and changes or functionality being rolled out. I say it's the closest, and not that it is going to be a bulletproof, because even within SharePoint Online, with no customizations applied, you're still going to come across some bumps in the road, some hiccups here and there inside of the user interface. Just recently, I've seen something out there where if you go to an edit mode and you try to add in a web part, you can no longer get to the buttons to add that web part. So that may be something that's already fixed by now, since the last time I checked it out in a couple of days. But that's something that is out there. So this is a constantly evolving and growing tool. It does have a lot of updates that are pushed continuously out there. Not everything can be tested across the board, so you are going to have some bumps along the road. So even if you don't even get into branding SharePoint, you could still have some UI issues here and there. However, it's not going to happen very often, and it's not going to be something that's completely going to debilitate your site and to not allow users to come through and modify or effectively use the site and the content within. Another big benefit with out-of-the-box design, hey, everything's been tested because you're looking at the same thing that Microsoft is looking at, and so the new functionality that they're pushing out has been tested against their UI. So that's beneficial. So it's going to save you some time. You can also go through and you can add in your logo. Now your logo is going to go in place of that blue SharePoint boxy logo that you have in the upper left-hand corner. And your logo can go there just as long as it's in that predefined size. You don't have to match your logo file to that predefined size, so you don't have to worry about that. It is going to come in and shrink your logo down to fit that horizontal box. So you may run into some problems if you have a very square logo, because your logo will get shrunk down, or if you have a particularly long, so width-wise logo can get shrunk down and things may be difficult to read. It really just comes down to what you have for that logo file. You may need to do some alternative treatments for your logo file so it fits well into that space, because that space is all that you get. So what are some of the drawbacks of doing it this way? Well, most obviously, you can't brand your website. So you're not going to be able to bring in corporate colors. You're not going to be able to bring in additional content, such as maybe social networking links, or you've got another level of navigation that you want to add to your site, or perhaps there are things you want to remove from the user interface, such as the help icon or the share and follow links, or the left navigation going along the side, also referred to as the current navigation. So you're not going to be able to get in there and really manipulate the user interface in any way. It's going to be, you get what you get and you don't throw a fit. Essentially, it's what I've told my kids for years. You get what you get, but you don't throw a fit. So that's what it's going to be with out-of-the-box design. It's going to allow you to get up and going the fastest. It will allow you to do a little bit of personalization with that logo in the upper left-hand corner, but that's going to be where things are going to end. Before we start walking through what you can do with a theme and CSS and master pages, I want to talk about what it is that actually goes into generating your web page. We've got several files that are going to work together in order to create that rendered web page, and understanding what files come in can also help you understand the branding options that you have and making that final decision of what do you do? Do we brand our site? And what level of branding that you want to come in and do is going to depend on several things. I cannot tell you, yes, brand your site, or no, you should not, and yes, you should use a master page, or no, you should be using CSS. It really comes down to what is it you want to do with that design. Now, before we talk about that, I do want to mention one thing, something to keep in mind. And I know this is really strange coming from someone who does branding for a living for SharePoint, but probably maybe one of your better options for SharePoint Online branding is actually to not do the branding. If we think about the purpose of SharePoint Online, it is a tool for internal work. So you may be using it for project websites, client websites, for internal management of that client. You may be using it for an intranet or for document management. There's lots of things that you may be using SharePoint Online for. But they have since gone through and said, we are no longer going to give you the ability to have websites that can be seen externally. So if you wanted to have a public-facing site that was like a brochureware site, telling everyone about your company and the services and products that you provide, that ability is gone. We've got some legacy sites that are still hanging around that they're going to support for a bit longer, but overall that idea and concept is gone, and it's really turned inward. This is going to be a tool to sit right alongside Office and Word and PowerPoint and things like that for your employees to use in order to store documents and list information and to collaborate on that information. When we look at tools that are available outside of SharePoint, and not just necessarily content management tools, but just tools, period. So we have a boutique training company that focuses on SharePoint training and consulting. So we use a lot of web-based tools, things for accounting, customer support, things like that. With those tools that we subscribe to, much like how you subscribe to SharePoint Online, I don't have customization options with those tools, nor do I expect to get it. That tool is there to serve a purpose. It's there to give me a set of functionality that I am going to use to help my business run. I'm not thinking I can come in and completely change the user interface, put in different colors, add in different images and gradations and header graphics. I have no expectations for that. I'm lucky if I can put in my logo, much like how you can do with SharePoint out of the box design. But we accept that because those tools have been given to us and we're just okay with it. But that same courtesy does not seem to extend over to SharePoint. Again, probably because of its history when it was on premises and had all these customization options. But when you move to using SharePoint Online, you should probably consider, do we really need to brand this? Because once we go in and we start branding this, we are going to increase our maintenance. You're going to, as you get into deeper and deeper levels of branding, you will have to be diligent about keeping up with your site, making sure that any of the roadmap updates haven't negatively affected anything. Just a few days ago, I saw where updates to the site contents page had completely gone in and messed with someone's website and their design, and all their navigation formatting had poof gone away. And it's really not that difficult to go in and fix. Usually it's just a matter of looking at a little bit of code, making some tweaks to your own, and you're done. But you're constantly living underneath this cloud of, am I going to walk into the office today and part of my SharePoint site's going to look different? And more than likely, you're going to be notified of those differences by your end users. They're going to be the ones coming to you saying, why does this look different? My stuff's messed up. Another challenge with how they handle the ripple functionality and deployment is not all SharePoint Online sites get the same changes at the same time. So you may see a change, but then another organization doesn't see the change for another 2 weeks or for another week. And you may have apps, or you may have other types of third-party tools that you're using, or perhaps you're using third-party consultants that are then responsible for updating code and stuff like that. And then you run into the problems of not everyone sees the same site. Honestly, I could kind of just go on and on and on. There are challenges. I don't want to, deter you from doing any custom branding, but just please know what it is you're going to be committing to. So let's talk about those different files, and so we can kind of understand the guts of SharePoint and what it is that makes up a SharePoint web page. So I'm going to switch over to a whiteboarding tool, and we're just going to do a little bit of drawing. So we're going to draw out our typical web page. We're going to keep it simple, so we're going to have a header. We're going to have a logo. Now, if you notice, I'm not going with the SharePoint design per se, but just something that we would typically see. Navigation, and let's go ahead and put in the search, and then we've got left navigation that gives us additional information. Let's go ahead and put in a footer. Perhaps we've got links, copyright information, and then we've got our actual content within the page. So I've got a title, I've got copy, and perhaps we have a sidebar with an image and additional links for related information. So here is our rendered final web page that our end user is going to see. And I'm going to split this up into 2 sections, and we're going to talk about the components and the files that come together. First, we're going to come in and we're going to highlight what is different about this particular web page versus what is going to be the same as we go from page to page to page to page. So for example, as we go to all the different pages in our website, we're going to have the logo. We're going to have the navigation, the search, the current nav, the footer. We're even going to have a box that's been set up to say, okay, content goes here. So anything that you can imagine that is layout based, information that you're going to see on every web page or nearly every web page, that's going to be part of your page and is coming from a particular file. And this file is going to be referred to as a master page. And a master page is going to have a .master extension. Now you're never going to see .master in the URL of your website. So the master page is just purely there offering information that's on every web page or nearly every web page. But then we have the other side of it. I'm going to flip colors again. And that's going to be the content area. Now this is going to be what's going to change from page to page. The home page shows one thing, my contact us page shows something else, the about us page shows even different information. So this is going to be our content page. Now the content page is going to have an extension of ASPX, and this is what you do see in the browser. So think of home.aspx, default.aspx. When you go into a list or a library, you see all items.aspx. If you go into settings, you see settings.aspx, change page.aspx, user alerts.aspx, all sorts of different things that are inside of your SharePoint site. So every single web page is going to be an ASPX file, and it is a content page. It is going to come in and provide that title, provide that body copy, the photo, the links, and any other information. Now the fact that that content is going into a predefined spot, well, that's going to come from the master page, because we want the content to go into the same predefined spot at every web page level, because we want a consistent user interface across our website. So we have content pages. They have the ASPX extension. That's what you see in the browser. Now, one of the first jobs for that content page is actually going to be to link to a master page. So it's going to say, all right, I need a conductor. I need someone to come in and tell me where information should go, what information do we have available on every page, and that's one of the first things that that content page is going to do, is link over to a master page. So let's talk about what is it that's going to come from that master page file. It is going to have HTML. And not just HTML as in an H1 for a header or a paragraph for a paragraph tag, but the HTML that's going to be needed for the entire web page. So your opening HTML tag, your body tag, your form tag. All of SharePoint is a form. So we have your form tag. We've got all sorts of other scripts and CSS and .NET controls and all sorts of the things that we need to make up this design. So we've got HTML. A part of that HTML is going to be links off to CSS and off to JavaScript files. JavaScript's going to bring in functionality. So I select to edit page, and now my form updates to where all of the form fields can be modified. That's going to be functionality brought in by JavaScript. Or the fact that my scroll bar is only going to go through the content area of my SharePoint page, and I've got the ribbon that appears up at the top and it's docked at the top. That's going to be coming from JavaScript. CSS, on the other hand, is going to be giving us look and feel. It's going to give us that standard formatting that we see with SharePoint. Your drop-down menus that have a shadow behind them, the text being in a simple gray, the sweep bar across the top being in that classic SharePoint blue. So the CSS is going to provide style information. We're also going to have something called .NET controls. And .NET controls are all of the functionality bits. And so you've got search, your navigation, the fact that maybe we've got a logo right here that links back to the home page. That is functionality. So your master page is going to be filled with these different .NET controls. Now going back over to the content page, it's going to include content. But it does not need to include all of these things that we just outlined underneath the master page, because the master page has already provided it. It is literally as if I'm working with two different puzzle pieces. So the master page is piece one, the content page is piece two, and they fit together. They do not have duplicate information across the two different puzzle pieces. So you're not going to see an opening HTML tag or body tag in your content page. You are simply going to just see the content. Now this page is pretty powerful. It can actually even choose to override information inside the master page. So maybe it decides I don't want to have this navigation up here, or I don't want to show the search. The content page can come in and do that. Which is why I always say when I'm talking about master page that it's going to be content on every web page, or nearly every web page, because the content page can come in and override that master page and take away something that's been provided. So we've got supporting files like CSS and JavaScript files that are either bringing in style and functionality. We've got the master page, which is doing HTML, .NET controls. Here is the core layout of my site. And we've got the content page that's bringing in the actual content. It's going to link to the master page. And it can also come in and provide page-specific code, whether that's CSS, JavaScript or .NET controls. So maybe you've got a particular functionality that only needs to show up on this given project site that you've created. So we've got a bunch of project sites we've created for all of the different projects within your organization. And we've got some kind of functionality, let's say share, that we only want to put over there. So now that content page can come in and provide it just for that page, or provide CSS or JavaScript just for that page. And just to clarify, when I say JavaScript, I'm going to include its cooler brother of jQuery as well. But what if we're dealing with content that we've got several instances of? So you've got 12 different global office locations, and every single office location page needs to include direction information, fax number, mainline information, information about parking, so on and so forth. Maybe you want to put a weather widget or whatever it is you would like to do, someone who's in charge of that office. Or perhaps you've got a lot of documentation that goes along with HR files. So if you need to submit this, then you have to fill out this form. If you need to submit this, then you fill out this other form. And here are detailed instructions for all of these forms. But I want to spread out those detailed instructions. So I've got one web page per set of detailed instructions. So anytime you come across a situation where you've got repetitive content, we can introduce another level. And that's going to be a page layout. Now, real quick, the master page is going to be stored in the master page gallery in your SharePoint site. The page layout is also going to be stored in that same master page gallery. Your content pages, on the other hand, are pretty much everywhere. You've got a whole mess of them that are installed with SharePoint itself. You've got a bunch of them inside your content database. You have them in various places if you're working with working with lists and libraries and things like that. They're just everywhere. But if you've identified that there are subsets of your content that are repetitive in nature in regards to how they look, the content that they ask for and prompt users to fill out, well, then we can create a page layout. And a page layout is going to be like a stepping stone in this process. And the content pages themselves, because we're going to have several content pages that are involved in our SharePoint site, those content pages are going to link to the page layout. The page layout, in turn, links to the master page, just as this job right here happens with it linking to the master page. But the page layout is going to create one single layout that can then be used for multiple pages, like the one we have up here. So we've got an image, links, and text. Or maybe we decide that we want to have some variety, and I want one that only gives me one giant area for content. Or I've got another one and I want to have 3 columns where I can put in web parts, a 4th one to put in content, and then maybe a 5th one to do more web parts underneath. So any structure that you can visualize for your repeating content, you can go through and create a page layout. Now, the one thing about this is going to be for publishing sites. So inside of SharePoint, doesn't matter if you're SharePoint Online or Premises, you've got publishing sites and non-publishing sites. So publishing sites are going to be Enterprise Wiki, and it's also going to be the publishing template. It's very poorly named. Non-publishing sites are going to be things like team sites, blogs. Your non-publishing sites are going to be a bit more right away in regards to when content is posted and when changes are done. They're also not built to handle a lot of branding. They can do themes and they can come in and update your logo, but that's all of the branding options that you really have bubbled up and available to you from the user interface. Publishing sites are the ones that are really built for custom branding. It's going to allow you to very easily apply master pages and CSS files. It's the only place where you can have page layouts, which are going to be your content templates. Publishing is also going to bring the ability to not immediately post your changes to the web like you do with a team site. So I can make changes to a web page, I can save it as a draft, I can go home, enjoy my weekend, come back on Monday and keep working. I'm also going to have the ability to do delayed publishing. I can have workflows, people approve the changes that I've made. So publishing sites are really built for really large websites, especially things like your intranets, maybe your extranets, where you have a lot of people accessing information. Perhaps you have a lot of content owners. They're built for big websites. Non-publishing sites are built for small websites with small teams of people either collaborating on the information or accessing the information, where blog being a bit of a weird child that's been put in there, because with blogs you could have a large audience. But blogs are meant for just one person or a handful of people to contribute to. So page layouts, an easy application of master pages, is a publishing feature only. So I'm going to come over here and I'm just going to type in, or write in, publishing. So I would definitely recommend that you look into publishing sites if you're not using them already. They are incredibly handy and they can bring a lot of things to the table for you. So these are the various files that we're working with. Master page, it's going to be the conductor. Here's all the stuff that you're going to have on every web page. Content page, which is an ASPX extension. It's going to link to a master page. It's going to also bring in stuff if it wants to, but most importantly, it's going to bring in the content. Now, it is important to note that this page layout is also going to be an ASPX file extension. So it's not going to quite be like the content page where when you go to the browser, you see the page layout name in the URL. It's not going to work that way. It is literally just another stepping stone. So let's clear this out real quick and draw that out. So we've got master pages, we've got page layouts, and then we've got content pages. So we have two different ways that this could work out, and then we're going to draw this again. So we're going to do a master page, and then we're going to do a content page. So for our website, the content page links to the page layout, gets its uniform design for the templates, and how the content's going to be actually organized on the page. The page layout links to the master page. All of it comes together into our single page where we've got all of our design. And whatever ASPX file is here is going to be what we see in the browser. So this is home.aspx, default.aspx. And this is going to be for our publishing. But if we're looking at non-publishing, then we're going to have a bit more of a direct relationship. The content page is going to link to the master page, and together they generate the final rendered web page. All right, so those are the various files that we have that we're working with inside of SharePoint. So let's go back over to our presentation and talk about themes. So this is going to be level 1. This is going to be the safest way to come in and do branding. So if you've decided, you made that initial decision, the out-of-the-box design isn't for us, we need to do more than that, then your first level is going to be a theme or a composed look. Kind of one of the same if you ask me. So themes should be bulletproof. I just don't like to say never, because, you know, I go by that old adage, never say never. So I'm not going to tell you 100%, no matter what, it's going to be bulletproof, because we know that the UI can have problems on its own with zero custom branding applied. So this is going to suffer from that same fate. There may be times where something goes sideways, and it's nothing to do with what you did or any of your custom files. It's a problem within SharePoint Online. But it's going to be really, really close. And it's going to pick up some of those same benefits. And so all the functionality changes and things have already been tested. It's also going to pick up the benefit of your logo can be added within the predefined size. I can't go off and be crazy and add it somewhere else on the page. Still has to go in that same box. But I can add my own colors now to my site design. I'm not stuck with that white and a few shades of blue here and there design of SharePoint. Now, some of this drawbacks with this approach is going to be you're very limited on what it is that you can actually modify. So when you look at the design of a SharePoint site, you've got code that is generating the look and feel. Even though it seems really minimalistic, there's a lot of code out there that's saying, okay, make this gray, make this red, make this hover blue, make this hover over here a light blue. And that code has been marked with special flags to say, okay, this can be modified. Let me show you an example. So this is core-v15.css. Now this is going to be a copy from on-premises SharePoint. This is not a copy from SharePoint Online. However, they're going to be using very similar files. But I can see on line 9 that I've got a replace font, and then it goes on, and then I see replace color. And if I keep scrolling through, I'm going to see some additional ones. Replace color, replace BG image, replace BGI image. So there are just specific places in this file that say, okay, by default, you're going to be this color, which is a shade of gray. But if you've provided new information, then this color can be updated. So that's what I mean when I say there's only going to be predefined areas where you can update those colors. You're not going to be able to add new content to your site, and you can't go through and hide or remove any stuff that you don't like. So we talked about removing the help icon, or maybe share, or maybe the left navigation. I can't go through and do that. So I'm going to be limited to only rebranding predetermined pieces within the existing style and design of the SharePoint site. So let's talk about going through and building out a theme. We've identified that yes, we can come in and control our colors. We're just only going to be able to control it in set places. So let's look at the other side of that. So we're taking a gander over here at the actual core v15 code that's got different marks to say, okay, this can be replaced, this can be replaced, but some of these other things cannot be replaced. But then we come right here, and then this can be replaced. Now they're going to be replaced using a color palette file. And I've got a sample one opened up right here. Now this is going to be one of the SharePoint color palette files. There are lots of color palette files available inside of SharePoint. There are 32 to be exact. And you can preview them sort of inside of SharePoint. But if you'll notice, it's going to say, okay, if you see command links, we want to put in a new value. And all of these alphanumeric values are called hex codes, and they're going to be a color. So if you see this, then you're going to put in this. If you see strong lines, you're going to put in this. Now, just as a side note, if you're more familiar with code, some of these aren't valid. So you're only supposed to have 6 characters within a hex code, and you can see like some of these have more than 6. So that's just kind of as a side note. So we're coming in and saying, okay, if you see body text, then we want you to do the following. So I can go back over to core v15, and if I do a find for body text, this particular one, it still has it set to 444, which is going to be the same as 444, 444. So we don't have any change there. So I can maybe look at the next one, settle body text, come back over here, do a find, paste that in, and we still have yet another one. So, but this is actually a good example of not all of the themes are going to recolor everything. So some of the themes are going to keep the same colors based on if it's got a light background versus a dark background, or like we're going to keep all of our body text a dark color as long as we have a white colored background. But this is going to be the file that you have to work with. So if you want to come in and do your own custom theme with your own custom colors, you would create a copy, which is what I've done here, and then you would go through and you'd make modifications. And you can say, okay, every time you see this, you see that. Here's where it gets to be a little tricky. You don't have access to this file with SharePoint Online. If you're SharePoint on premises, then you can get a copy of this file. I'm also more than happy to send you a copy of this file, but it's not going to necessarily be the same one that's being used by SharePoint Online. I can get to the file using browser tools, but I'm not going to be able to get to a copy of this file that's going to retain all of these comments. So I can make these SP color files, I can create my color palette file, but I don't know what it is that I'm doing. I can't see if I go through and I make a modification here, what exactly is that I'm changing. So what Microsoft has done is they've provided a free tool called the SharePoint Color Palette tool. And you can use that URL right there, and it's going to redirect you to where you can download this tool. Now please note, it is going to be Windows only. So if you are on a Mac, which a lot of people are being brought into SharePoint with Macintosh skills and Macintosh hardware because they've got experience using other CMS tools and things, then they're not going to be able to use this tool. But you can use this tool, and let's go ahead and go over to looking at a screenshot of what the tool is going to give you. And here's a copy of that tool. So it's basically going to say, okay, here's your page background, and we can go through and we can set a color to this, and it'll give you a little preview of everything and how it looks. It's not a beautiful tool. Okay, the UI here isn't going to be gorgeous, but it is going to give you some help with trying to connect those dots, that if you want the background to be a dark color, then this is where you would specify it. And it'll go through and generate the files and everything for you. So you have that at your disposal, the SharePoint Color Palette tool. Now, as you're going through and you're using the Color Palette tool, if you opt to use it, or if you're creating your SP Color file, it does require a certain level of comfort with SharePoint. So you just kind of need to be comfortable working with these types of files. And so you need to either you yourself or have someone on your team that has that kind of comfort level. If we go back into our SharePoint site, and we're going to come in to this one right here. This is an example of my custom theme that I've gone through and created and applied to my SharePoint site. Now, we're based off of the Lear Corporation, and here's the Lear website. Kind of just get a feel for what that website is going to do. And don't know anything about this website, didn't pay attention to what it was built on, just simply going through and saying, here's an example site, let's get it into SharePoint with the different levels of branding that we have. And this is going to be what it looks like with a theme. Now, Lear was very similar to the gray existing theme, and we just went through and made a couple of modifications, so when you mouse over the navigation, you see red instead of it being a different color. And I could continue to take this to another level. I could put in red in some other places and stuff, but there's really not a whole lot I can do because it's a pretty simplistic design. It's a good design, but it's a simplistic design. And so I don't have a whole lot of, cues that I can then leap off for my theme. But if I go into my site settings, and from there go over to Compose Looks underneath Web Designer Galleries. Here are all of the composed looks that come with SharePoint, and you can delete any of these. None of these have to remain. And then down at the very bottom, you'll see the one that I've created. It's linking off to my layout, which is seattle.master. It's linking off to my color palette file, and then it could optionally link to a background image and a font file, which I'm not doing. So you just need to be comfortable enough to get these files saved into the right spot, get your composed look created, and then go through and apply it. So that's going to be your options for going through and building a theme or a composed look, and kind of the end result that you can get. We can come back and look one more time over here. I've got my grays, I've got my logo in the predefined space, and I've added in a couple of things where it's going to bring in those additional colors. So the next level up is going to be CSS, or cascading style sheets. Now you can do an awful lot with CSS. You do a tremendous amount of branding with CSS. Now CSS is going to be style only, no functionality. So it's not going to be able to come in and add content or add navigation. I can hide things from the UI, but I'm not going to be able to flat out remove them, and that's a very big difference. So underneath the pros column at the very bottom, we can see we can add new content, but underneath the cons column, we cannot remove, I'm sorry, I messed up on that one. In the first column, we can hide undesirable SharePoint components, but we can't go through and remove it. So CSS is going to be a little bit of security through obscurity. And I'm just going to use the word security loosely because, well, it's just kind of a catchy thing to say, security through obscurity. But with CSS, I can set things to not display, but that does not mean that it's not rendered down to the end user. So for example, I wouldn't want to have sensitive information about salaries and then use CSS to hide it from certain users because they could still get to that information. I haven't secured the information away, I've just hidden it from their view. It's as if I wrote on a piece of paper and then held up another piece of paper in front of it. You can't see what I wrote on the piece of paper underneath it, but it is still physically there. And if you pulled the first piece of paper away, then you would be able to see what I wrote on the first piece of paper. So CSS is going to allow you to hide stuff, but just keep in mind that you don't want it to be anything that is sensitive, and your end user will be downloading whatever it is you're hiding. So it's not going to stop or improve the speed of your website because you're still downloading all of that code. but you can do an awful lot. We can take that logo to the next step. We don't have to be confined to that predetermined size. We can make our logo go larger. We can make it be on the other side of the page. You can go through and you can add new stuff. We can add header images and gradations. We can add more graphics. We can take the color palette to the next level. We can format all of our menus. You can do a lot with CSS. So let's go take a look at our design, but with the CSS applied. So this is another subsite here in SharePoint Online. And you can see I've been able to do a lot. I'm going to come back out to the home page to kind of see our theme compared to our CSS. And then finally, here's our CSS versus our final website. So we have a few changes, mainly just the sweet bar up there at the top that we have to have. But if I were to come through and I start to scroll, I can see that my navigation changes up above. So it's going to change color and it's going to get fixed in the top position up there. That's really nice. I can't create that with CSS. I'm not going to be able to read the scroll and make those types of modifications. So that's not something I can do with CSS only. If I come back over here and I go down to the bottom of my page, I've got a significant footer. I've got navigation that's been repeated. I've got additional links. I've got social networking. I've got a logo. If I come back over to my CSS only design and I go down to the bottom, well, I'm able to do the logo. So I can do minimal content insertion with CSS, but I can't come in and do functionality. I can't add functionality, and I can't add things like massive amounts of navigation. I could add in text. I can add in an image. I can add in a graphic, but I can't add in an image that is then linked to another web page. That would be functionality. So CSS can do a lot, but it is going to have its limitations. So we can kind of see the example here of what we were able to do with CSS. If we come up to our top menu system, we were able to repeat the formatting of layers. If I come down here and I go up there we go. So we're able to go through and do an awful lot with CSS only, but we are going to have limitations when it comes to removing content permanently so users don't download it, and coming in and adding in new content. So if you're going through and you're going to decide to build out custom CSS for SharePoint Online, you are going to need some more advanced CSS skills. So you need to have someone on staff or someone that you can contract with who knows their stuff when it comes to CSS. CSS can definitely be learned, but it just requires a little bit of practice and some patience in order to go through and figure out the different ways you can manipulate everything on the page. But you can have a single file, and then that single file can be added to your SharePoint site or sites if you have multiple. So you don't have a lot of maintenance that has to come with CSS. It literally can be a single file. Now you may have a few more if you're also linking into images and things, but the design, the custom design we have over here, actually all of the images, and there's only 3. We've got the logo up here, I've got the header image, and then the logo down there. I've actually stored all 3 of these images away from SharePoint. And so SharePoint Online is able to link successfully to these images and bring them in. So I actually technically only have 1 file that I've added to my SharePoint site for all of this stuff right here. So you may only have 1 file, you may have a few more depending on the different assets and things that you need to deploy. But you can really, really, really do a lot. Now back to publishing again, and I'm going to mention publishing a few more times. It really is super handy, and publishing really is set up to allow for easy custom branding. Now this is going to be for SharePoint Online or on premises. Non-publishing sites like team sites are really meant to be their own little islands on their own, and no one comes over and visits, and they just kind of sit there. And so if you want to go through and do custom branding, you have to do a few more jumping through hoops in order to make that happen. The other big drawback with building out custom CSS is you've now officially crossed over to the dark side. So with the out-of-the-box design and with themes, you're staying pretty safe. Can't do a whole lot for design, but you're pretty safe in regards to those ripple effect of rolling updates. But now we're moving into completely changing the UI, potentially, moving stuff all around, and some of those functionality updates that are pushed out may affect your design. I can't say if they will or they won't. It really depends on the code that's been updated. Something that I've discovered as I've been writing CSS code blocks for SharePoint Online, I'll write out snippets that do certain things. And they'll work great for 6 months, and then they stop working. And a lot of times I'll go in to kind of debug to find out why it's not working. And all I need to do is make my CSS selector, which is what pinpoints an item on the page, I need to make it a bit more specific because there's something that's been added to the SharePoint CSS or the SharePoint code that is not allowing my changes to shine through and be applied. So usually it's not a massive undertaking to get things fixed. I can do it pretty quickly. But we're going to that zone where not only are your end users walking into the office and everything looks different one day, but so are you. So you're not prepared. You're not realizing what's going to, be affected. And when it comes to the roadmap, you can pay attention to the roadmap. Highly encourage that you do. But that roadmap isn't going to include information like, hey, we're adding in a bunch of code that's going to totally mess up your custom branded website. So you're not going to have those kinds of warnings. So it goes back to, the site contents page was recently updated and it ended up breaking half of a design that had been applied to this other website. So that a friend of mine had and came to me with the problems. So you're officially moving over to the dark side with this and saying, okay, I am going to take on the responsibility of checking my website, of being prepared to debug it quickly and to go through. And you are going to be the one to make that decision of, is that worth it? For some people, brand is everything, and that is very much worth it. So if you're working for Coca-Cola, my bet is you're going to brand that puppy, and people are going to be there in order to fix it when things go south, because brand is very important with some organizations. So you just have to go through and make that call. But you can do an awful lot with CSS, as we can see right here. All right, so let's go on to the next level, and that's going to be master pages. You're really crossing over to the dark side here, okay? Because with a custom CSS file that you can apply with your publishing sites in SharePoint Online, it's just an added file that you're tagging on. But when you move over to master pages, now you are going to break that connection to the SharePoint Online master page. And you're going to say, no more am I going to use what you are providing me. I am going to completely go on my own and use my own file. So with custom CSS, you're adding a layer on top. When we look at this site right here, this is still using the main master page used by all SharePoint Online sites, Seattle.master. We're just coming in and adding in a new layer of paint, but the foundation is the same. CSS can be looked at as coming into a new house and you decide to repaint, put up wallpaper, you change the photos that are hanging on the wall, maybe you change out the floors. That's CSS. I'm going to redo whatever has been added on top of my foundation to make it look pretty. But once we move into master pages, now we are knocking down walls, we're putting on additions to the house, we're taking out windows, we're converting that garage into a really awesome man cave, whatever it is you need to do. That's what master pages is going to do. It's going to take it to the next level. And that next level is going to require walking away from your SharePoint master page that's been provided. Now they're going to tell you that that master page may be updated. And I'm sure on occasion it is, but not very often. Just because a lot of the functionality updates that they're rolling out just simply don't have anything to do with the master page. It's going to be updates as in we've changed the UI for something, and that UI for that given page is not in the master page. It's going to be off in a different file somewhere else. Or maybe we've, upgraded this functionality. Well, that's sitting in a JavaScript file somewhere. That's not in the master page. So if you decide to break off and do your own custom master page and not use the SharePoint Online one anymore, it's really okay, because not a whole lot of updates are going to happen. Something that you can do is just keep tabs. Maybe you pull a copy of the existing master page that's out there right now, and then every time a lot of updates are pushed out through the roadmap, you can do a file comparison. So I would have my backup copy. So before we went to the dark side, I made a copy of Seattle.master, and I keep it offline. Or maybe we just rename it to a different, or don't rename it, but make a copy of it inside the master page gallery with a different name, whatever it is that you need to do to make a copy. But now I can use a code comparison tool when new changes are pushed out and say, okay, they have updated their master page. I am going to do a code comparison tool to find out what those changes were, so then I can decide if those changes need to go in my own master page. So you are taking ultimate control and also taking on the responsibility of checking to see if there's anything that ever needs to be added to your master page. And it's possible it could happen. I'm not going to say they never update the master pages. They just don't update them very often. So a lot of the benefits we had with CSS, we still have with master pages. You can add your logo anywhere, any size. You can even change the link. So the major pet peeve of SharePoint is when you go into a subsite inside of SharePoint and you click that home logo, it just takes you to the home page of that subsite. And pretty much everyone on the planet is going to expect for behavior for it to go to the top level site. So the home page of your intranet, not the home page of the subsite. You cannot change that functionality with CSS alone. That is a master page level change. But we can add our color palette, and not only can we hide stuff we don't want from the UI, but we can actually physically remove it. So our end users aren't downloading that code. So we really truly have security if it's something that's secured, or if we just want to make sure we minimize how much people have to download when they visit our website, then we can do that as well. And you can add new content. So looking at our example SharePoint site, our final tab here is our master page. So we've got some changes. This is going to be the CSS only, and I've got the suite bar up here that we've collapsed down. We've removed some elements, but it's still very Office Online. But I go over here, and this one, it almost looks like SharePoint on premises. We've gone through and we've modified a lot of the behavior. We still have our menu, but we've also added the ability to have breadcrumbs. So if I were to dig through my site, this is breadcrumbs. And if I go down to the bottom, I see my footer. So I see the navigation's been duplicated again. I can see my social links have been added, and I can see my other footer links and copyright information has all been added in. So the master page is going to say, okay, you can add whatever it is you want to add. And that's the only way you're going to get things like social networking links and stuff like that. All right, so our master page is going to give us the ultimate level of customization. But we are taking on that, I hate to use the word burden, but we're taking on that challenge or taking on that baggage that if there's any changes that are pushed down from SharePoint Online to your master page, you'll have to manually go through and update and put in those changes. All right, so let's talk about building out custom master pages. So this is where we're going to put in the breadcrumb, the footers, the social networking, and all that other stuff. You're going to create a new file and put it in the master page gallery. You need to be comfortable with SharePoint. You need to be comfortable with code, or whoever's going to be doing these actions for you need to be comfortable with all of it. You're going to be manually adding files to SharePoint, or if you're working with a Windows machine, you can connect via a mapped network drive. Last time I checked, at least, you cannot do that with Macintosh yet. Our custom master pages can only be applied to publishing sites. You can technically apply them to non-publishing sites, but you have to jump through a few more hoops in order for it to happen. So again, publishing sites are built and they are set up for going through and making custom branding, adding custom branding, making everything beautiful. Non-publishing sites just are not set up for that type of customization. And then just like with our CSS, but maybe to a new level, any design or content can be affected by your rolling updates. So what is it that you do? What decision do you make? I don't know. That comes down to what your organization needs. If you have to have more navigation, you have to have social networking links, you have to have a column added over here with text, something that cannot be accomplished in another way, then yes, you need to go to a master page and just be willing to say, okay, well, we know what we're getting into, and that's cool. We're prepared for it, and we're not going to be taken off guard if things end up needing to be tweaked down the road because we've got a conflict with some new UI that's been pushed out. So let's look at it one more time. So here is our master page. We've got our content that's been added to the bottom extensively. We've added more navigation and different components. Yet it still has a lot of the things that our CSS did, where we've got the ability to do our menu formatting. CSS looks a little bit more like Office 365 in regards to our suite bar and stuff up here, but I'm able to do an awful lot. I just can't add the content in at the bottom. And then going down one more level to our theme or our composed look, I'm able to bring in my colors and my logo, but everything else is going to stay the same in regards to what SharePoint looks like and what it's going to provide and offer to my end users, such as share, follow, help, notifications, edit links, whatever it is that they may have access to. is going to show up, and I can't go through and either remove it or hide it from the display. All right, so let's talk about page layouts. Now, page layouts are going to stand alone. So we've got levels of branding, themes, CSS, master pages, and then just kind of off on its own are page layouts. So they're going to allow you to customize the content. They're going to allow you to make reusable templates. So back to our 12 office locations for all of our global offices, or perhaps we've got a bunch of informational pages on how to fill out forms within HR. And all of that documentation and instructional information needs to look the same. Perhaps sales and marketing have a lot of graphs and they have a lot of pie charts that they need, so they need a lot of web parts, or they need the ability to have big chunky spots on their page. But if I move over into IT, I've got a lot more text, so on and so forth. So as you move through your site and the content that it's providing, you can identify where you have templates. You can also use this to hide or remove components from the page. So if you want to get rid of the navigation on a given type of page. You can also add in CSS. It could be affected by rolling updates, but it's a little bit more controlled. Because when you get into a custom master page, you're affecting your entire website. This is going to be affecting one type of content within your website. Maybe you make something super generic and so it does affect everything. But if you have something more specific, then those rolling updates may or may not touch you, because perhaps we're only using page layouts and custom CSS and hiding components from the screen for only our HR section. So our other sections of our website is not affected, so on and so forth. So there's lots of different ways this could fall out. Let's look at an example of a page layout. I'm going to go back over to our site, and we're going to go into edit mode. And I'm just going to look at the other page layouts that are available out of the box with SharePoint. It's going to come with a bunch. So here's my page layout right now. It's just very simple. It's got a large content area, and then it has a bunch of different columns where I can add in web parts down at the bottom. If I go to the page tab in the ribbon once I'm in edit mode, and then I go over to page layout, I'm going to see all of the different layouts that I can switch to. So I'm going to go to image on left. And once it changes that page layout, my content's going to remain the same. Gone are the various web parts that are available at the bottom. And now I've got the ability to add in an image and a caption. I have article date, and byline. As I go through and I switch page layout to page layout, I'm not going to lose any existing content that I've put in. Let me go back over to summary links. So now I have a summary links web part that's been added on the right hand side. I still have article date and byline, but my image is gone and I still don't have any web parts added to the bottom. So the page layouts are going to just give you an assortment of different ways you can lay out the page, and a part of that layout is prompting end users for content. So I'm going to go back over to body only. Now these are the page layouts that come with SharePoint. And now we're without web parts and we just have the content. So these are the page layouts that do come with SharePoint, and you can customize this list. You can remove any of these, and you can also come in and add yours. So we could have a HR section. That would be then on a gray bar, and I could have multiple layouts for HR or sales and marketing or whatever it is that you may need within your organization. You can create multiple layouts, and those layouts would then support and provide multiple templates for your reoccurring content in your site. So I'm going to go ahead and publish my page. Now when you're working with a custom branded website and you decide to go all the way, you're going to do a master page. You're probably going to have one master page file that may link off to, or should probably link off to, one CSS file, potentially 2 or 3, but let's just go for one now. So one master page, one CSS. You decide to go with page layouts and you identified 10 different types of content templates that you have inside of your site. So now we got 10 page layout files. Then you're going to have hundreds of content pages. Something to note about page layouts is a page layout is a content page because it is an ASPX file. It's just super special because it's also stored in the master page gallery. All right, so that is going to be page layouts. Let's discuss deployment options. So this is where things can get to be really different, especially if you're coming from working with SharePoint on premises. So once you move into SharePoint Online, you can't go through and use farm solutions. So Microsoft is going to say that you should use the Office Dev Team's Patterns and Practices Provisioning Engine. Say that 5 times fast. And that's going to go through and let you configure the assets that you want to deploy and the sites that you want to go through and deploy them to. And then you can also use PowerShell commandlets, and you can go through and you can provision all of the assets and you can activate them. Now the 2 URLs that are listed here on the screen, the SPO 1 and 2, are going to redirect you to some articles and resources that are going to talk more about these approaches and how to go through and complete these things. So we've got the P&P provisioning engine. You can also go through and do custom client-side object model code. And that's going to be where you are going to upload the files. You can set an alternative CSS, which is how you're going to apply a CSS-only solution. And then you can also go through and create and activate the composed looks that you have put together using your SharePoint color palette tool. So more information for that's going to be available at that short link that's provided with SPO3, and that is O and not a 0, so SPO3. Some other options that you have, so if, let's say you go through and you put in some page layouts like we discussed, maybe you've got some images and things like that you want to put in, and you've decided that you've got multiple sites and you want to make these changes available to your multiple sites. So you can actually deploy a custom add-in to your organization's add-in catalog inside of SharePoint Online and on premises. So that P&P provisioning engine that we were looking at just a moment ago from the Office Dev team is going to take this approach and combine the add-in model with the custom CSOM code. And we have another link right there, SPO4, that is going to give you some additional info on how to go through and do this. The biggest thing to remember with SharePoint Online is that it's really structured for you to be running a single site. So there's no easy button, and if the scripted approaches don't seem like it's really your deal, then you can go through and do it manually, which most of us is going to be running in production. And that's okay, because a lot of us do it that way anyways. So there's a lot of resources right there. I'm going to go back. So you can see those other URLs. So it's SPO 1, 2, 3, and 4 for those short links. And those will take you to some additional resources for your deployment options. Again, you're going to need to be comfortable with code and with SharePoint in order to do these. But a lot of folks are just going to manually upload the files and manage them that way. What gets tricky is if you've got multiple sites that you're working with. All right, so to wrap up, let's talk about a few next steps. If you're interested in any of these options that we talked about with going through and branding SharePoint Online, we do have some courses that may be of interest to you. We've got our SharePoint 2013 branding experience, and that's going to be a course that I teach, and for 4 days, we're going to talk about master pages and CSS and page layouts and how do you get rid of that help icon and how do you go through and get rid of the current navigation and how do you add in your own footer and stuff like that. So we're going to go through how you're going to come in and you're going to customize everything. And we work with SharePoint sites that are on premises, but 98% of what we talk about can be applied to SharePoint Online. And at any time, we can go and specifically look at something about SharePoint Online. Remember, SharePoint Online is still just based off of SharePoint on premises, so a lot of the information is going to be crossed over between the two. We're also going to have the SharePoint CSS experience, and that's also going to be a live instructor class taught by me, and that's just going to be a 2-day course, and it's all CSS all the time. So if you were thinking that's pretty dang cool what we were able to do with CSS over here, then that class is going to be for you, because that's what we do is we look at regular old SharePoint sites, and we're going to turn them into stuff that you see here. We have several demos and sample sites that we go through, and we completely change how SharePoint looks and to modify it to look like something you would never think could be inside of a SharePoint site. So it's a lot of fun. It's a fun class. It's a fast class. We go through a lot of information in 2 days, but it's going to hopefully really open up and let you see just how large of a world and branding possibilities you can bring to the table with CSS only. We've also got the SharePoint 2013 Design Manager Workshop, and that's going to be a CBT, so you're going to walk through it at your own pace. And if you're interested in using Design Manager to generate any of your files, which is going to be independent of the decision if you're going to be branding SharePoint Online, but if you decide to brand, and then you decide to use Design Manager, that can give you some tips and tricks and some information on how to go through and use that tool. So we've got short URLs to all three of those. And then, of course, as a thank you for attending our webinar and spending some time with us, I really appreciate you doing that. Here is a 15% off code that you can use for any of our courses. We also have a web development course and other types of options like that. And you can go through and use the code webinar and get 15% off the cost of registration. So thank you so much for joining me. Again, apologies for all of the streaming issues that we experienced, and hopefully this information has been useful. And if you would like to go through and send us any questions, let me go ahead and bring up how you can go through and contact us. If you have any questions, please go ahead and you can leave a question or any comments below, just right here in YouTube, and we will get right on top of any questions or comments that you have. You can also choose to email us directly at connect@sharepointexperts.com, and all I ask is if you're sending any kind of branding questions or why does this look funny or something like that, please go ahead and include a screenshot or anything that could help me see visually what it is that you're facing and having to accomplish. And you can always contact us directly through our online forum online at sharepointexperience.com/connect. Thanks again so much for joining us today. I really appreciate your time, and I hope to see you in a class soon. Y'all have a great day. Thanks.